What are these exoskeletals? First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Veeraba, who I work with, and we've partnered in a company called Cyberonics. So technology has advanced in rehabilitation from the 50s with conventional, and then you have computer-based biofeedback systems, and then you have computer-based rehab systems, and then we moved on to robotics, then motion sensors and exoskeletals, and now we are talking about AI, VR, and AR. So I'm going to talk briefly about an overview, what are the ergonomic considerations, the safety regulations, the technical challenges, and how we work this human-machine interface, and what is the cost and what is the future. So exoskeletals, as I said, you've all seen them in different movies, in RoboCop. You've seen the Iron Man, which you've all been fascinated how he developed that. So the exoskeletal basically comes from where in animals, yeah, the beetle, the grasshopper, the tortoise, these all have exoskeletals which they have protective mechanism as well as stability mechanism, and that's how they've evolved. So it's a gait assisted device used for spinal cord injury or any kind of mobility problems. It is something that you can wear, has either powered or not powered. They have enhancing abilities with physical, and they have a diverse application. So there are different types. 4 types broadly classified. One is unpowered weight bearing, where there is no power source, and the movement is basically on the body's mechanism, aiding an incomplete paraplegia or incomplete disability. Then you have an unpowered joint targeted. So it's specifically across a joint, targeted on a joint. Again, it is unpowered. And then you have the powered ones, which are both of clinical, which can be just weight bearing for stability and standing, or the other thing is across the joints for mobility and walking. So the key components are, there are 3 main components. One is called as an actuator, and a sensor, and a control system. So the actuator is one which has it's like the mother chip, the brain computer interface where it happens. So it has a microcomputer which controls movement of various motors and with various hydraulics across the joint and various systems. And then you have the power supply, which is battery operated, because you need to have power. And this has been the biggest challenge in developing, because the power is out very quick, because the hydraulics involve a lot of power. And then you have these microchips or OLEDs, which are sensors with photoiodides. And these are sensors which actually detect the muscle movement. So for every contraction and every relaxation, there is a positive and a negative energy that's controlled, an isometric contraction. And so this is converted into sensors, which goes to the computer, which is powered, and then it helps with the joint. So this is the mechanism of how overall it works. Now, the use has been there for a very long time. Actually, if you go back, it's dated back to the 10th or 15th century, where Leonardo da Vinci had drawn the first a picture of how an exoskeletal works. And it is also, if you look at the knights, if you look at the warriors, and if you look at people in the past, they always wore exoskeletals to protect them in the battlefield. So we have in mobility, we have this devices in industries where they lift very heavy metals, heavy weights. It is used routinely, and it is also used extensively in military. The application has actually moved from military and now into medical devices, because in military it was more for excessive power when you are doing excessive activities. So the ambulatory exoskeletal systems are there commercially available now in the US and in the Europe market. In India, it's still not yet commercially available, though we have told 2 of these from Chennai, but both patients have not been able to use it. I'll come to the reasons why. So the various exoskeletals developed so far, they're called as the Rex, which is 85 pounds, and we have the Hall 5, we have the Blix. Each one has got a specific reason why they were all developed. The Trojan is probably the most extensively used one, but it is used for military. It has it's bulletproof, it has knives, it has explosives, and it is pretty much what you see in the movies. Like in the Avatar, what you saw is what is this device which is used extensively by the US military. So these things are already in existence. It is not anymore a fantasy. All we are trying to do is to bring this technology into healthcare, into medical applications of how this can work. And I'm sure pretty much in the next decade, there will be a solution for people with paraplegia. Maybe not for quadriplegia, but definitely for paraplegics, there is a lot of advancement in how these things work. So the ergonomic considerations, there's a lot of things, work that goes behind how this is developed. And I just want to focus on that because I don't think there's anything more I can talk. So the development of it is, we have to look at muscle fatigue. You can't have a device which is 300 kilograms. You can't carry it around because the patient already doesn't have muscle mass, doesn't have power. So you need to have something that is very, very light. So the design, the material that's used has to be very light. And it has to be very, the control of this and the comfort of wearing this has to be there. And that is one of the challenges that in both our patients which we devised, the first device, have not been used because it weighs about 90 to 110 kg. And these patients, both of them were young individuals who were only about 60. So wearing a device and standing for more than 20 minutes, half an hour was a big burden for them. The next thing is dexterity. The range of movement should be very seamless and very smooth across the joints when you are actually walking with this device. There has to minimal interface should be there. The battery shouldn't be too excessive. The design should be very conducive. There should be a proper grip. If you have a hand grip, then you need a proper grip and proper manipulation. And fatigue, muscle fatigue, energy expenditure through the battery and the comfort of wearing are the biggest challenges in designing. The next comes safety and regulations. In India, we do not have any regulations as of now as to how these devices should be designed, how it should be used, and what kind of a training it should happen. The most important thing is, even though you have this device, these patients need 6 months to 1 year of training wearing this device every single day as to how to use it for safety. And that is the key to the success of these devices. So you have to identify potential hazards. You look at the likelihood and severity, mitigation, various strategies. We have to have compliance. We have to look at risk assessment, where this patient is going to use. Is it at home? Is it for mobility? Is it for work? And what is the, the training that he's going to undergo? There's a lot of liability as well with regulation, ensuring compliance with safety standards. As I said, we don't have them, at least in our country, addressing the risk with the patient wearing this, and how this works and how these sensors will work, what will happen. Technological challenges are, the power consumption is the biggest technological challenge because the hydraulics consume a lot of energy, and so manufacturing them and to use them for 1 hour, you will drain the battery within 40 minutes to an hour. So you need high power, and we're working on those as well. How to improve the battery life. Accurate sensor placement. So the sensor placement is what decides how the mobility happens, how the muscle contractures, and then you have to train those muscle groups. So we have to choose the muscles that are active and the muscles that are paralyzed. And then based on this technology, we have to make the active muscles work with the sensors, and then you have to make sure that the passive muscles are used by the exoskeletal. So sensor calibration, identifying the sensors, doing multiple EMGs is a key, and so there's a lot of work that happens before you even design it for a specific patient. You cannot have one design for all. Yes, abroad they have come with various levels of injuries, but at the same time it has to be customized to that specific patient and which are his strong muscle groups. So the control systems again have to be very precise and accurate. So you cannot have error, because if you have error, you can fall down, you can injure people around you, or it can injure the patient himself. So we have to look at all the sensor integration and the interface between which you have to use them. So the human-machine interface is the key, where it has the cognitive load. So what the cognitive load mean is the sensors and how much load this can be transmitted across the patient. How can the patient balance? How can the patient have control over this? Whether the control is going to come through the muscle group or through hand control. So you can have a device which can be controlled with your hand as well. And adaptability, what is the disability of the patient? What is his level of injury? If he's got hand function, but say a C7, T1 injury, can this be used across a C7 injury with the minimal hand function? So skills training, so this is the most important. Once you find it, you identify, you need a proper team who understands both the exoskeletal as well as the patient's capability, the patient's willingness to do this, the willingness to in this, the patient's willingness to have this for a long period, because these come into several lakhs of rupees, and you cannot just buy one and use it for half an hour a day and just store it in your house. So it has to be something that's really useful for him on a day-to-day basis that he's going to use it. So these are the skills training that has to take a lot of time, and the first thing we aimed at in these two patients is psychological training, whether he is ready to invest in this technology, in this money, so that he will use it. And then the cost and commercials, the manufacturing is very expensive. The devices that we have done are, that they have tried in India, at a very low cost. They're not as efficient as the ones abroad. But there is ongoing research, and this is the close work with IIT Chennai as well, this work we are doing here. So the market viability has to be seen. The cost is very high. So the advantages really, to summarize, are, disability can be overcome. There's increased mobility and performance. This can be functionally beneficial to the patient, and it improves his quality. The disadvantage, of course, research has to be done, and normal suit costs $45,000. Specialized parts are required. A lack of power supply has been our biggest challenge, and a lot of things are still going on. So the future is exoskeletals will be out in the battlefield. They are already out. It will be there in medical use, and it can definitely be a big change and a big boon to people with paraplegia. Thank you.